National Insurance Clearinghouse, the marketing arm of Brokers Alliance, presents a Bravo video event, the Business Insurance Zone, dedicated to financial professionals who use insurance in their practice.
And on today's show, our expose on combination annuities with Ken Davis, CPA.
And now the host of the Business Insurance Zone, the whiz of the biz, insurance columnist Steve Savant.
Well, hello everybody. I'm Eric Palmer, filling in again today for Steve Savant, and with me is Ken Davis, CPA as mentioned at the beginning, but you've got quite a few other credentials: CLU, CHFC, CFP.
Yes, sir.
That's quite the list.
It is. It's a little alphabet soup there, and I also like to say I'm a recovering CPA.
Recovering CPA. Now we're broadcasting live from for a nationwide audience of insurance and financial professionals here from Fountain Hills, home of the largest fountain in America, and we're talking about some pretty interesting stuff this week. We talked yesterday about, as you call it, the invisible interest, this taxation, or the invisible taxation, the ability to have some of this additional interest in our investments that could add to the taxation of Social Security up to 85%. We addressed a little bit about how some other things like municipal interest and possible capital gains can add to the equation. You had mentioned something, though, and we didn't get a chance to put it in there, but you had brought up the bittersweet spot, if you will, of taxation on Social Security. Why don't you address that for us for just a moment?
Well, let's just talk about that real quick. Obviously, up to a certain point, Social Security is not taxed. But then once you hit that threshold, in our tax reports they can send away for, we'll go through what the thresholds are. Then you start to tax at 50%. And fairly quickly you hit a second threshold where 85% of Social Security is being included, and then eventually get to the point where all 85% of Social Security is included. Well, obviously any increased income over that doesn't add any more because we've now totally decimated the Social Security income by adding 85%. Well, what happens is that layer of income can be greater and greater. So the techniques we're talking about, we want to point out, don't work for everybody. Because if I've got people well above the 85%, if I reduce it through this combo annuity concept we're going to talk about, the reduction doesn't really hit the formula yet.
Okay.
But at some point in time, with other strategies, we may, and we're going to talk about those too, may drop into the point where we do impact it. So there's that, what we would normally say a sweet spot, but in this case a bittersweet spot because it's bitter because we're paying taxes in that middle ground.
Well, I think important to note is that we're talking about this topic for two reasons. First, we want to educate the advisors out there on the opportunities, but also talk about an edge that you can have in your marketplace on marketing, getting new prospects, new people to talk to, and even if you don't hit the right demographic, you've got their attention. And there's other things that we can do. Once you get past that sweet spot, we introduce life insurance, we introduce some other techniques, but at that point you have a client you're talking to and you've got their attention. I think that's one of the most important things to point out about what we're talking about here is this is going to get the attention of the consumers out there, because as we mentioned at the beginning, not very many people even realize up to 85% of their Social Security can be taxed.
Well, let's back off a little bit. What's interesting is when we look at different professions, we tend to have blinders on. CPAs are focused on taxes. Insurance agents obviously are focused on selling insurance and annuity products, and so each have our specialties. Well, the CPA sees line 20B and says, gee, that's a tragedy, but they're taxed, there's not much I can do about it. And the insurance guy goes, 20B? What the heck's 20B? Adjusted gross income, modified adjusted gross income, what is that? Why should I care, right? So they're not really focused on it either, but I took my tax knowledge and my insurance knowledge and said, wow, combo annuities, something I've loved, I've used for years, first in the old version, now in the modernized version, and we can apply these concepts where we can actually reduce adjusted gross income using annuity products, and that's what we're talking about, to the point where I can actually have an impact on line 20B, reduce the taxation of Social Security income, and reduce the taxation. And as we said on the first day, we had a $10,000 income increasing taxes not by the 25% tax bracket of $2,500, but $4,200 plus.
42%. And that example, if you're talking to clients, that's an example to use. And if we're having advisors call in, they can get these materials from you, right? Mm-hmm. So call us in, write us at thebiz at brokersalliance.com, call us at 800-290-7226, extension 147, and we'll provide you with a lot of these materials, these examples that we're talking about today. We might even share the link for H&R Block's calculator, but at the end of the day, an example like this is really going to get the attention of people out there. Now, We left off yesterday talking about the taxation of annuities, and the reason why we're kind of taking a step back here to address more of a 101, 201 level of taxation for annuities is because if you understand the foundation of these products, it's going to make a heck of a lot more sense when we start talking about the combination of them. So yesterday we kind of left off talking about the key point of an annuity, which is tax deferral. So we're earning all this interest, but we're getting the true compounding effect of this interest because the taxes are deferred. You mentioned yesterday LIFO. Let's kind of reiterate that for a second. Last in, first out. That's the new rule of thumb.
Yeah, basically, deferral comes in two versions here. There's the deferred annuity that has deferral and no 1099s at the end of the year. Then we have withdrawals from those deferred annuities where the earnings are taxed last in, first out. And then once we've used up all that income, then we get a return of principal, which is non-taxable. But then the third piece that we didn't talk about yesterday is taxation of annuitization, where I take a lump sum of money and for a period of time, 5 years, 10 years, or for life, I'm taking a guaranteed income from the insurance company. Okay, taxation of withdrawals are LIFO, but what's interesting is when I annuitize, a portion of it's tax-free and a portion of it is taxable. I like the analogy I saw one time from one of the wholesalers. If I've got a layered cake for a birthday cake, and my first couple layers were my contributions. That's my tax-free return of capital. Then as time goes by, I'm adding new layers. Well, those are income layers. And then ultimately the icing on the cake. And that all of that is taxable. Well, if I take a horizontal slice of the icing and those top layers, that's all taxable. And then ultimately, once those layers are gone, I get slicing into the tax-free return of capital. Mm-hmm. And that's withdrawal taxation. We switch to annuitization and we're getting a vertical slice where we're slicing through the income and into the return of principal so that we get part taxable income, part tax-free. And that's done on a straight line amortization.
Right.
Now, we talk about loopholes and things. Normally, isn't this really just kind of like if I do a 10-year annuitization, isn't that just like a bank loan?
Somewhat.
Where I'm paying the bank principal and interest? Well, now I get to be the banker as the investor, and the insurance company's paying me principal and interest. Well, what do we get on a normal loan is almost the entire first payment is taxable, right? It's considered interest income, and slowly but surely more and more of it becomes principal.
Very slowly.
Very slowly. Well, with an amortization of annuity, we do straight line instead of an accrual accounting. And why that's important is almost all of it is tax-free. When I do this vertical cut, using say a 5-year immediate annuity, well, essentially straight line means I take my total investment, say $100,000, divide it by 5. I've got $20,000 of return of principal on that formula. Only the excess is taxable over that.
Now, it's really interesting you're talking about annuitization because what's happened in the annuity industry, we see it all the time, is the income rider dominates now. So what we see a lot of advisors talking about is don't annuitize, you lose control. Use the income rider because it's going to eat away at principal, but it's going to be a paycheck for lifetime. But there's some really important things to note about annuitization, and I always encourage advisors, don't take that off the table. Show them all the options because in some cases, annuitization could be good. Now, if you're taking a withdrawal from an annuity pre-age 59 and a half, there's a penalty.
That's right.
But in some situations, with annuitization, you could avoid that penalty.
Well, that's right. So just to back up, we're going through this process to show how the combo works later on. So we're doing the building blocks. So first learn what a deferred annuity is and how it's taxed, what a withdrawal is, how it's taxed, and then the annuitization. Now we're getting into Section 72T, which is how do I take distributions before 59 and a half and not have a 10% penalty? Because any distribution before 59 and a half, the earnings are subject to a penalty of 10%. Okay, and that now if I annuitize based on a lifetime or an equivalent annuitization, a withdrawal based on life, that's a continuous, consistent distribution, then now I can take it out. It may be taxable, but it won't be, if you meet the formula, subject to a 10% penalty. So, and basically, if you've got somebody who's 55 and wants to retire early and start taking this money out, well, they're not 59 and a half. They got about 4.5 years left to go. What they can do is they use 72T to start taking those distributions without the penalty. As long as the distributions are based on a lifetime and are in place for at least 5 years or the greater of 5 years or 59.5. Gosh, I love this taxation lingo. Greater of 5 years or 59.5. Then
whichever is longer. That's the key thing.
Whichever
so if I'm
is longer.
57 and I turn 59.5, I still got 3 more years. I got to take that calculated income. I can't change things, and then later on I can maybe increase it.
Right. Later on you can take it out at your heart's content at whatever times, whenever. But up until then you're constricted to or restricted to that formula base. So those are pretty much the rules. Tax deferral, withdrawals are taxable, LIFO basis. Annuitization is a cross-section, part taxable, part tax-free, and you have to deal with a 10% penalty. Those are your basic rules, and I know our agents know all of that, or most of them know all this kind of stuff, but later on in our segments, we're going to then start to put those back together and show you how annuitization can be used appropriately.
Now you've got a deferred and then annuitized tax issue. Why don't you talk about that a second? And it has to do with annuities bought from the same company.
Yeah, you have to be careful if we're going to be talking about layering. And thank you, that's really an excellent point. We're going to be dealing with immediate annuities, deferred fixed annuities, and then indexed annuities with lifetime income benefit riders. Just, it gets a little complicated, but this is what we need to do to reduce that taxation of Social Security. And so I lost my train of thought. The question again was?
Well, we're talking about purchasing, because we're talking in some instances 3 to 4 annuities being used in combination.
Right.
If they're from the same insurance company, that could present some issues.
Right. What could happen is in our design we're going to be talking about later is an immediate annuity maybe for 5 years, then 2 separate 5-year fixed annuities, and then an indexed annuity. So we're going to sandwich this thing.
Right.
Well, those 2 deferred annuities and the indexed annuity, for purposes of taxation, instead of being able to turn on an annuitization of each of those pieces separately, the IRS code says if you bought them from the same company within the same 1-year period of time, then you're going to the distributions will be based on formula using, in this case, up to 3 different annuities instead of just the 1. So one of the things we have to do, where we can help, where Brokers Alliance can help, is that we could have a deferred annuity from ABC and then DEF and then XYZ, so that we don't have to worry about that formula. So that it's very easy to get around, but if you're stuck with a particular favorite company, you're not going to be able to have them all from the same company at the same time.
Well, that's a really good point, because quite often we get caught up in the convenience of having them all from the same insurance company, but we want to be very aware of what that can do to the total overall process. You're listening to the Business Insurance Zone, the talk show that focuses on insurance in your practice. In the second segment, we're going to really dig into combination annuities and the old way of doing it, and why we think there's some necessary changes. If you have any questions or you have any comments about this show, you can email us at thebiz@brokersalliance.com. or you can call us at 1-800-290-7226, extension 147. Ken and I are going to be right back after a word from one of our premier product providers.
Whether you're a professional planner pursuing a strategic partner or an insurance distributor seeking a national alliance, your business just went into overdrive. Now enter the largest resource of insurance products and services with unparalleled access to a worldwide audience of consumers through the National Insurance Clearinghouse, the marketing arm of Brokers Alliance, who can take your company and launch it into the stratosphere of success. With countermeasures, the most comprehensive carrier intel in the industry, the MASH unit with field triage underwriting and the premium tolerance test, the life insurance financial evaluation, the most rigorous policy review, and Bravo high definition broadcasting with online social media. Your search just ended.
Welcome back to the Business Insurance Zone. I'm Eric Palmer, filling in today for Steve Savant. Now remember, before moving forward with any of the planning strategies on the show, seek advice or approval with your CPA, attorney, your broker-dealer or broker-dealer compliance department. You can call us toll-free at 1-800-290-7226, extension 147 for any of your quotes on life insurance, annuities, DI, long-term care, or group pension plans. And it's not what I know, it's who I know. And today with me is Ken Davis, and as we mentioned at the beginning, Ken, CPA, CHFCs, CFP, CLU. Am I missing any?
No, I think you got it all. That's a real mouthful.
But at the end of the day, I think that what that really says is that you know your stuff and you're bringing a lot of value to our advisors at Brokers Alliance, and we appreciate the information that you're giving us. And in the first half, we were really talking about some good stuff with the taxation of annuities, how annuities can be taxed, some of the things to look out for. What I want to do in this segment is really talk about now the old way of combo annuities, the old version, if you will, and why, despite the theory of being good, why it doesn't really work today.
Well, yeah, I've been at this since 1980, and one of the things I've always liked, one of my favorites along the way, is a combination annuity, or what we call a combo annuity. And it's really taking an immediate annuity and sandwiching it with a deferred annuity. Now, why is that important? Well, just for a simple example, let's say under the old situation where we had much higher interest rates than we have today. What I would do is simply compute what portion do I need to put in the deferred at the guaranteed interest rate to grow that portion back to the original investment. For instance, if I had $100,000, maybe interest rates back then would allow me to put over a 10-year period 70 grand into a fixed interest formula that would grow the 70 guaranteed back to the 100. Okay, then I'd have my 30,000 would fall out, and I can go out and get the best 10-year immediate annuity I could find. Now, what's cool about that is the 70,000 piece, obviously, there's no 1099 coming out, right?
Right.
So we're using our deferral to maximum advantage. And then I take my 30,000 piece and I'm annuitizing it. So as we learned in our segment earlier, that I take that 30,000 and annuitize it over 10 years. Well, what happens? Straight line amortization is very simple. I take the 30,000, divide it by 10, and I've got 3,000 of return of principal each and every year for 10 years. And we talked about the fact that that really works to our advantage because instead of having more income in the earlier years, the straight line amortization actually gets us to the use of the principal, return of principal, tax-free. So it's only the excess earnings that are taxed. So that really works pretty cool for a couple reasons. One, first of all, I've replaced fully taxable income with only a partial amount of income. So obviously that portion that isn't taxed is a nice tax benefit, but more subtly is that doesn't add to my adjusted gross income and taxable income on the second page, which may actually drop me into a lower tax bracket if it's significant enough. So I get two pieces, a lower tax bracket for all my other income and no taxation on that portion that's deferred. So now I'm using full benefit of tax deferral concepts and amortization of basis and an immediate annuity by putting these two together. And when interest rates were high enough, that worked just fine.
Right. With the immediate or the annuitized interest rates, we were getting anywhere between 8-9% income of overall principal, and then preserving the principal at the end of the day. Now, the old split annuity concept, like you said, Ken, it's been around for a long time. When I first got into the business, I recall running with that because it's no secret that we did mailers, we talked about potential Social Security taxation, but it was such an easy sell. We went in with a split annuity illustration, and it was a home run. Interest rates are different. Treasuries maybe floating around 2% if we're lucky. The long-term investments aren't there for insurance companies.
Right.
The numbers just don't add up anymore. So if we took that same concept, tried to use a split annuity, what's going to happen?
Well, we'll have very little into the immediate annuity. We just won't get much in the way of a distribution. All the other tax things work fine, but ultimately the clients were. This is a term that Steve and the rest of us are now using as net spendable cash flow,
right?
Or net spendable income after taxation, because we're finding real quickly with the show, for instance, that tax brackets don't mean a thing. We think we're paying 25%, we're paying 42%. We think that capital gains included at 15%. No, it's taxed at 15%. It's included at 100% in these other calculations. Medicare premiums are being based on adjusted gross income. I mean, it's a crazy world. So when it's all said and done, we got to filter through these calculations for our clients. That's what they pay us for, is to be smart with the tax law and filter it all down so we can show them what the net effect is. And that's part of our job here at Brokers Alliance.
Well, I think it's really important too, because we get so hung up on, as advisors, talking about preservation of capital, preservation of principal, and we're trying to find all these strategies, or stretch strategies, if you will, to show our clients how we're not going to eat up all their money. But the reality is, you can't take it down that road anymore. I think that it's really important to note that if we kind of carry this mantra, net spendable income, that you're going to reach out to more consumers today than you would maybe the consumer of the past. It's if you get over the preservation of principal and actually maximize the amount of money people put into their hands, you're probably going to have a much more powerful and applicable story to the boomer market and the Generation X market that's coming up behind them.
All right, now we've started with the basic principle of one immediate annuity and one deferred annuity.
Right.
Okay, so that's our first building block. That's our first grade assignment of adding addition. 1 + 1 is 2. Well, now we start going to a little more complex structure where we have one immediate annuity. Instead of 10 years, maybe we do 5 years. Why would we want to do that? Because we get to amortize basis over 5 years, not 10 years.
Right.
So on 100 grand, I get 20 grand a year return instead of 10 grand over 10 years. So then I fill in with that next layer of a deferred fixed annuity, and then I might have another layer of deferred and fixed annuity, and then we'll get into what we add on that for the modern concept. Well, that allows us to turn the switch on every 5 years. And a couple of really cool things happen, and we're concerned about inflation and interest rates because they're so low right now. Most of us really don't want to lock into those low interest rates. So with 5-year segments, we're only locking in for 5 years, not for 10 or 20 or for life, okay? So at the end of 5 years, I've got 2 deferred annuities in that example, right? And I can turn on one of them, and I'm going to either get a market rate on that particular one, or I'm going to move to do a 1035 and do a 1035 exchange, tax-free, to a new one with the highest interest rates on the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. And then the other deferred annuity, the penalty period's gone. We've gone our 5 years, we're done.
Right.
So now we can do a 1035 into a brand new and shop the market all over again. That helps the client get the very best interest rates, and then it helps the agent too, because we get a new commission on that new one. We might get a little lower commission on 5-year annuities up front than we will for longer term, but ultimately we get a second sale and the client is served, and we've overcome some of the inflation. 2
points come to mind there. First, I think you make a great point about the fact that if you build up these strategies and use multiple annuities, sure, you're taking a little less, potential commission up front, mm-hmm. but it's a longevity play. You've got a long-term client. Every several years, you've got something to go back and adjust or tweak or help them annuitize to make the next step happen. And I think clients receive that well.
Sure.
They go, he's not trying to do everything all at once. There's a plan here. There's a plan in place. And if anybody's ever heard me talk, I always talk about, whether or not you're that business card stapled to a policy in a shoebox in a closet, or whether or not you actually have a long-term strategy. You're the planner. You're on a first-name basis, and nobody can come in behind you and change things.
And the other thing I'll point out, we've been part of the theme of what we're talking about is utilizing CPAs and other tax professionals as allies. They will get it. When you start showing this more complex strategy, showing layering, utilizing the tax law, that's impressive to them. Okay, it should be, because they don't know this stuff, right? And you might think they do, they're the tax advisor, but they don't know this stuff. And so as you go through and they see that you're treating the client well, they'll gain trust in you because they have a negative viewpoint of our industry. And if we can show that there are honest, ethical agents, they want to work with you. And they will refer additional to you. Now, I want to get to one of the negatives on the strategy.
Okay.
The first layer is great because I'm getting a whole lot of basis, right? Well, the second one, what's happened? Well, let's say that I've got 25,000 in that, and now it's 30,000 to make the math simple. Well, now I got 5,000 of gains. So guess what? When I annuitize that deferred gain's now going to be partially taxable. So each time I turn the switch on, a larger and larger portion is going to be taxed.
Well, that's a really important point because we're calculating these numbers. Again, many of us are not certified planners or tax planners, and so we've got to be very careful at the end of the day for showing our clients the amount of money or the amount of income they should be expecting. If we're not taking that tax into consideration, we could be way off. And what do clients always remember? The numbers that they saw on the page. So you've got to think about the gains that are built up in this strategy, and that's an excellent point.
Well,
how do I go about making those assumptions, because in many situations, I can't predict. I mean, it's pretty clear that we think the tax is going to go up, but I can't predict that. So in your opinion, what's the best way to approach that topic with your client so that they understand that there's going to be some taxation on those gains?
Yeah, what we do is we have some software that actually shows these layers and shows the portion that's taxable and the portion that isn't. So we're going to take this complex thing and put it into a bottom line figure to help through, and we just have to make sure our clients understand that we don't know what the future taxation is. We know the portion that'll be taxed, but we don't know what the tax rate will be.
And if you want to get your hands on this stuff, we have it here at Brokers Alliance, and we have the ability to actually help you come up with these compilations and put it into a package that's presentable to your client. Give us a call, 800-290-7226, extension 147, and our entire annuity staff here at Brokers Alliance is trained on this stuff. They have access to Ken, and we really can help you put this information together, because at the end of the day, we want to be accurate. We want to be correct, and also address some of these additional issues that you're talking about today.
Right.
So just to kind of close things up, if you will, we've got an issue that comes to light quite often when I'm talking about combination annuities, and that's liquidity. What happens if there's an emergency? I know that over time that can become quite a problem. So we're going to talk about the modernized version of combo annuities and how we can kind of address some liquidity things and whatnot here throughout the show. So remember, you can catch us on brokersalliance.com. We have an on-demand button there in the red right below the video on our site. You can catch us on our social networks, YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And at any given time, you can write us at thebiz@brokersalliance.com. My name is Eric Palmer. I'm with Ken Davis here. We're going to continue on throughout this week. You've been listening to Brokers Alliance's Business Insurance Zone. That's the buzz on the biz for today. Get into the zone, the Business Insurance Zone.
Video event of the National Insurance Clearinghouse, the marketing arm of Brokers Alliance, one of the largest distributors of insurance products and services to a nationwide network of insurance professionals. Need insurance guidance? Call Brokers Alliance. The Business Insurance Zone, dedicated to financial professionals who use insurance in their practice.